Great. Okay, so we're recording from here, just so we can come back to it, and if anyone misses the class as well, they can catch up. So I guess the most important thing I want to say is we've communicated this over email, but it's, this semester is not something that any of us have expected, or the changes that have had to occur. Fortunately, I think this unit is one that there's already a lot of content, and the quizzes and the structure is online. And fortunately, things like assessments generally lend themselves to being relatively easy to switch online versions. It's something that, I think we're pretty confident of being able to achieve still a pretty good learning environment from. But please bear with us through the semester. Obviously, the changes, even though they're not as big as some other units, are happening on the run, and they do take a lot of sort of detailed work. So if there is anything missing at times, or there's links or something like that that will be thrown up there that don't work, get back to us, as soon as possible. We're keen to hear about it. If there's more resources that we can throw up, then let us know. We're really kind of relying on you guys this semester as well to keep us, to make sure that we're giving you the best experience. But also making sure that we're just looking after each other as well. Probably someone's decided to do some works outside my house. So I think that this is a time, obviously, where there's lots of changes going on, not just changes to units switching online, but there's lots of changes going on in everyone's life as well. So there's people, I'm sure, around the virtual room at the moment who have lost part-time employment. I think most of us are stuck at home, obviously, in different ways. We might not have the technology that we want in this environment to be able to interact with the way that the units are turning online. So we understand that there's all sorts of things going on. You might get sick this semester, or have people around you that are sick, and that makes it difficult to study as well. So I guess on a broader sense, obviously as a course coordinator for a number of you, I think it's important that that we're here to support you as best we can during this time. But also from a unit perspective, we always understand when things happen, and there's always processes in place to make sure we have flexibility and other ways to meet the learning outcomes, whether that's extensions for assessments or whether that's modifying assessments. But there's always things in place for that, and this is a semester I foresee quite a bit of that. So it's not going to be the odd few students. There is going to be a large number of us across the country taking this unit who are going to have some difficulty at some time during the semester, if not throughout the whole semester. And so just keep in communication with us, both on an individual level, but also on a group level as well. So I'll quickly go over some of the the deadlines and changes that have happened in 217 that you've probably already seen, but bear in mind all of those really are things that are flexible this semester. So if people are telling us that we should be moving the competency exam back a little later in the semester because we're not sort of quite on track for that, then we can do that for everyone. Same with the mid-semester exam, same with the group research project. So if there's any flexibility we can offer en masse, we will do it, but also individually for your circumstances, we're more than happy to be flexible. Just keep us in the loop and communicate as best you can through this difficult time. All right, so they'll go through, I'll just recap some of those changes that we've sort of outlined in general, knowing that some of the specifics we're sort of still working on, but in general, I guess probably the most critical thing that in people's minds in terms of performance in the unit is the assessments. So as I kind of mentioned, the mid-semester exam, which was a face-to-face exam planned for week 7 of semester, is going to be an online version of the same exam. So essentially we'll have the same questions that we've sort of been talking about already in the face-to-face classes, and we'll continue to talk about and make very clear what you're getting. That'll just be an online version, similar to the quizzes you've been getting for the content. You'll have one attempt at that online. You'll have a random article that will get allocated to you, and then you'll have to answer questions from the introduction content, from the research ethics, from the research methods, and do a bit of academic writing in there as well. The competency exam was also similar, was an in-class exam in week 12. So that one was planned where you essentially get a data sheet that's opened up, and everyone gets the same data sheet in a particular class. It's different between the different classes, and then you get a question and answer physical sheet to write down the answers to that. So things like, you know, what's the average of this group? What's the standard deviation of this group? What's the probability that the difference between these two groups is due to random chance? Probably don't know that at this stage on what we're talking about there, but then by week 12, I'm sure you'll be able to know that that's going to require a t-test. You know how to do it in Excel, and you just get the answer simply out from that one. So that one, again, we're just going to convert to an online exam. So similar sort of principle, same exam, just going to be online for you guys. The group research project was already going to be submitted, you know, as any other assignment through Leo, through Turnitin, but we were planning on doing quite a bit of the data collection and the teamwork on that in class. So we were going to dedicate sort of a portion of each class to working on that group research project over the second half of the semester. That's obviously not going to happen. But what we do have is these teleconferences and the ability to work online with each other. So we will be, as we progress into the second half of semester, we're going to be spending, I foresee, most of these teleconference times, and this can be quite flexible depending on your group as well, working on that group research project. Now with the data collection, as I mentioned, we typically do that in class on the other participants or the other students that we have in class at the time. If we give you data for the group research project, the difficulty is that then we're kind of taking away a lot of the design aspects of the group research project. And so, you know, we want you to be able to design individual aspects, and we want to be able to collect your own data and analyze your own data as well. So I think that the best way we can do it this semester is to get you guys to collect at home. The research you'll design should really be stuff that you can do at home anyway. So it'll be, you know, a reaction time online test like we did on, in class the other day. It might be doing something simply like jumping, or you know, a isometric hold until failure or something like that. Something you can easily measure at home, so you can test yourself. So worst case, you know, if there's 3 or 4 of you in a group and you all test yourself, you have at least some data to be able to run some statistics on. But ideally, you're going to, you know, most of us are with family or a few others around in the house, and so if we can test our, you know, roommates or friends or family who are around, maybe we can get up to the 5 to 10 participants mark that we would have otherwise in class anyway. So that's kind of the idea of the data aspect of the group research project, but we will be collaborating online and submitting as per normal through the Turnitin link on Leo at the end of semester. So that's what the assessments are going to look like now. Is there any questions that anyone has on those?
In regards to the, this is Lindsay, in regards to the research assignment and how, or if we should have done it earlier, how will we form groups without being?
Yeah, great question. So what we've done, and I might actually take this time to share my screen and hop onto Leo. So, okay, if I can do that. Can everyone see my screen then?
Yep.
Just give me a nod or a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Great, thank you. Okay, so as you guys have probably all gone through the Zoom tutorial video conference session, if we scroll down into the group research project, I know that not everyone's had a look through this, so I can see the stats online from the Leo, and some people have looked through it, but obviously we haven't been covered in class yet, and we said we were going to do that. Then there's definitely people who haven't looked through it yet. What you'll see here now, we've just posted up the top as of yesterday, is a group sign up for the 217 project. So that's basically a link to a Google Doc. And on that Google Doc, what you'll see, there's a few different worksheets. So this is the Monday at 12 p.m. and this is for you guys the Tuesday at 10 a.m. So if you go in there, you'll see the class list. So all of you guys should be on there, and then some space for you to put down your own group. So I want you guys to, and so this really, we'd like this by the end of this week to get on there, to put your names down, to have a discuss a research project topic. So have a look through those, and then as well establish a Google Doc that you're starting to share on. Now that Google Doc does a few things. One, it acts as a an easy go-to to be able to collaborate with each other. So the other one is it's also a place where you can get feedback from us as well. So as you're working on that project, if you're saying, Matt, we're a little bit stuck on this, on the participant information sheet over here, then I can get onto the Google Doc as well and see that. The third thing it does is actually help us sort of keep a gauge on the teamwork that's going on within the project as well. So obviously with the semester, we know there's going to be bumps along the road. So, if in 3 weeks in you have a teammate who you haven't heard from a week, then we can go onto the Google Doc, see if they've been contributing at all. And if they haven't, if they've been off the Google Doc for a week, then we can sort of say, okay, well, maybe we take the next steps in moving them onto an individual project, and the rest of the group moving forward with different roles as well in that project. So it's something that, I think that first step is really getting into a group of people you want to work with, choosing one of the topics that's on the Leo page. So there's I'll talk about that in a second, but there's a lot of different designs you can do within each topic, and then establishing a Google Doc that you all have access to. I can see a few of you have logged on to that Google Doc at the moment. Can you guys edit that at all? Can someone put their name down on one of the groups for me just to make sure? Just check the settings while I'm here as well. So yeah, I think it's editable. See some work going on. Yeah, great. Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. Cool. Okay, so we've got the right settings there, so you can hop in and edit there. As I talked to the group with yesterday, the class yesterday, with one of the things that I could perceive there might be a couple of questions around is if you haven't already been established, who else you've been working with in the first couple of weeks, how do you choose a group? At this point, I think we're still going to leave that up to you guys to be able to contact each other. I think a lot of people have expressed that they already have sort of established links of people they want to work with, even if they haven't, got a topic yet. But if you are struggling with that, let us know, and then we can kind of connect you up individually. Or if there's enough people there that are saying, hey, I'm not really sure who I want to work with in the group from the class, then we might have some other time on a teleconference or something like that for people to have some group discussions around how they want to do that. All right, so while we're on the project, sorry, did someone have a question there? No? Okay, so while we're on the project, I might just also go through that as well. So what you'd notice is that we've got the topics here at the top. And what you'll notice about the topics, hopefully, as well, is they're very broad. So we have played around in the past with this project of not giving people topics at all. We tend to find that a little bit overwhelming when we're like, this is kind of like week one when we were like, okay, pick any topic you want or any question you want, and people are a little bit overwhelmed. So we kind of have narrowed it down into a couple of different areas. But, we've used one or two of these before, and I've never seen the exact same experiment designed in that topic. So take, for example, distraction and reaction time. We've used that one before. So, some people use the online reaction time thing that we did. Other people might use the ruler test. Other people might react into a stimulus like catching a ball or something like that. But then there's all sorts of different distractions that people have, come up with, whether that be audio, visual, cognitive, a range of different things. So yeah, you've got lots of different room to move in the actual experiment that you designed within those topics. But if you can come to an agreement on something that kind of interests you, something I'd say when you're choosing a topic and just continuing in the planning as well is it's a continuous cycle of going back to the literature. So you keep going back in there and seeing the sort of the areas that people have defined in the literature, what people have done, what the gaps in the literature are. And that, you know, that doesn't necessarily, I guess people sometimes sort of are a little bit unsure of how to proceed when they look at the literature as well. So if you see a certain, you know, area of research in that topic, and then you might see a gap in that topic where people haven't done anything, you can kind of go about it in two broad ways. One of those is to kind of get pretty close to research that other people have done in the past. So you might see a particular paper or study that's used a design and tested on, you know, elderly population or just males or something like that. And you might say, well, that's a really good experimental design. We're interested, but we're interested in how that actually works outside of that or for a different population. So we might do that on females or younger populations, or we might tweak something small about the design. So we're, you know, interested in a different sort of distraction if we're talking about distraction reaction time. So you might actually, you know, use something that's very close to research that's being done, but you're asking a new question, and that's completely fine. In fact, it's a really nice way to build on previous research. Or you might go the other path and say, look, there's this big gap where no one's really looked at this at all, and you can design your own experiment kind of from there, as long as you're kind of linking it up to you know, theories and other studies that have been done in sort of parallel fields. So both of those are completely fine ways to do it, but it is going to be important to inform how you're doing the experiment, what you're designing. There's going to be areas that you haven't maybe heard of in some of those topics. So for example, the exercise on mood state, the first question a lot of people have is, how do we measure mood state? And there is a lot of different ways out there, but probably the biggest hint I'd give people from that is looking at something called the POMS, which is basically it's a large test of different mood states, and you might select one of those mood states. There's lots of them, and then you've got some preset questions to actually test people's state in that particular mood that you've selected. So that's a nice, easy way of doing that as a dependent variable, for example. So yeah, it's a kind of a continuous thing going back and forth with the literature there. The other thing I'd really strongly recommend as you go through and look at the project and start planning it is to really carefully look at the marking criteria and continually go back to it. So as you can see, we've got templates. We've got a template for the information sheet, the consent form. We've got the actual research form that you just type into, and we've got an abstract template. But the marking criteria is not only going to tell you what we're actually wanting in those templates, but it's not as straightforward as you think. So for example, in the participant information sheet, there's a little sort of section outlining, you know, telling you that you need to outline the methods of what you're doing. Okay, so that's pretty clear, and that is in the marking criteria. But there's also some aspects of that marking criteria, like minimizing the risk, which isn't really that clear from the template, but it is something that we expect you to put into that information sheet. So risks in here is worth 20 marks out of that participant information sheet. So it's a fairly large section of it, and you've got to outline what those risks are, as well as steps taken to minimize that risk. And so that is often where people miss out on some marks, is they're not really carefully reading the criteria. They're just putting into the template what they, you know, think should be in there or what they're prompted to put in there. So keep on going back to that as well. All right. Okay, so that probably covers I guess an introduction to the group research project in a way, and the next steps that we're moving forward. Does anyone have any other questions on the group research project? Okay. So I might go back to the group mode there. Okay, so I've got a bit of an agenda of stuff I want to get through today. and we've talked about general changes, assessment there. The one we probably haven't covered as much, but it's hopefully fairly straightforward because we're in it, is the replacement for those tutorials. So the face-to-face tutorials that we were doing, I just want to make it really clear that what we have now is two things to replace those. One is the online tutorial activities. So hopefully you would have seen already the Research Methods 1 online tutorial activity. About half of you guys have done that so far. So that was, anyway, when we turned last week's stuff online. Then this week what we've got live is the Research Methods 2 online tutorial activity. Both of those are Leo lessons, so they kind of go in there and they're trying to build on your understanding of those different concepts, but more start applying them. So giving you practice reading abstracts and actually identifying things like dependent variables, independent variables, extraneous variables. For Research Methods 1, for Research Methods 2, it's more about identifying, what might make it more basic or applied, what categorization of research in terms of experimental, non-experimental, things like that in particular abstracts. So that's really preparing you directly for the mid-semester exam, because that's what the mid-semester exam is, getting an abstract and identifying those things within there. So there's the online activities, but then obviously we've got this as well, which is the video conference sessions. So I don't see them going any more than an hour. Maybe today is going to be longer than others because obviously we've got some of this admin stuff to talk about. But as I mentioned, as we transition in the second half of semester, it's going to be more about the group research project. I think we'll touch on the stats activities that we'll be doing in the second half of semester, but that should be pretty straightforward with the activities we'll have online, as well as the video answers going through those. And so this video conference chat time will be more about the group research project. I'm also quite happy to make it fairly flexible as well. So if we're getting onto group research project stuff and people want to change the time a little bit, for their particular group, as long as we're sort of setting it up and it's fairly structured and I can jump in and out and give feedback, then I'm happy to sort of modify things as we need to as well. So those are kind of that's the structure for the tutorials moving forward. Any questions on that at all? No? Okay, cool. Awesome. So that takes us through pretty much the changes that we've got so far for the semester. And we've had a pretty good introduction to the group research project as well. What I want to do next is talk a little about the Research Methods 1 and Research Methods 2. Not so much trying to do exactly what the online tutorial activity is doing. And I know that most of us haven't, a lot of us haven't done Research Methods 1 tutorial activity yet, and that's fine. I'd recommend doing that as soon as possible though. The Research Methods 2 tutorial activity, because it went up on Friday, and I know most haven't done that as well. Again, that's fine. I'd recommend doing it by the end of this week. But I think it is nice to touch on a few things in those activities that people struggle on, and in particular still can give people a little trouble heading into the mid-semester exam. So one of those is identifying what is a dependent variable, what's an independent variable, what are extraneous variables, and how to define those. They're actually really hard to define. So you'll see definitions that we've got in the online lecture content, and obviously you can Google it and get definitions of those, but even interpreting those is really difficult without just practicing identifying what those look like in a research article. So what I might give you a little sort of verbal example of a study, and I want you to tell me what you think the independent variable or dependent variables are as a group. So let's kind of imagine a study where we're looking at a population of AFL footballers, and we're really interested in their core body temperature being affected in the pre-season, which is usually pretty hot. So we're going to try and, some teams try to reduce that by wearing ice vests in pre-season. So we're basically going to set up an experiment where they do an exercise activity in a lab. It's kind of mimicking the game demands, but they do it on a treadmill, so there's no tackling or anything. But we've got one half of the participants wearing an ice vest, sort of at breaks during that treadmill activity, and then the other half of the participants not wearing the ice vest. So then we're going to measure their core body temperature before and after that exercise activity. So what in that description do you think would be the dependent variable? Feel free to unmute the mic and let me know, or otherwise you can just type something down on the chat function if you want. Anyone want to chime in? Like I mentioned, it's a harder one, but have a guess. So the variables that we've got identified there would be, one of them, a variable would be an ice vest. So whether you're wearing the ice vest or not, that would be one variable. One variable would be core body temperature. Another variable, there might be any number of other variables in there that might affect the outcome of the study as well. Any ideas? What would the dependent variable be?
What was the scenario again, Matthew?
Yep. So we've got a study where we're looking at a group of AFL footballers. Let's say we've got 50 AFL footballers. They're doing a lab exercise session to kind of mimic the game demands of a game. And sort of half of them are wearing an ice vest, half of them are not wearing an ice vest. And then we're measuring core body temperature at the end of that exercise session and comparing them on their core body temperature between the ice vest group and the non-ice vest group.
We're looking for the independent variable, is that right?
Say again?
Are we looking for the independent variable in this situation?
Yeah, I was kind of asking about the dependent variable, but that's the next one is, what do you think the independent variable is?
I reckon the dependent...
Would the dependent be the body temperature of the players?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, that's it. So that's a really hard one to define, because when we say dependent variable, we often talk about like it's the outcome variable or the variable you're measuring as the end product of research. In this kind of design, it's a little simpler because you can say it's the variable that we're comparing between groups. So we're comparing core body temperature from the ice vest group versus the non-ice vest group. So that's the outcome really of the study there. But it's hard to define that in words. It's much easier when we get a lot of examples and we start defining, oh, okay, that's what you're measuring and comparing groups on. So it's the dependent variable. So in this example, the core body temperature would be the dependent variable. Is there an independent variable? And what would it be, you think?
With the independent variable, would that be the people wearing the ice vest versus not wearing the ice vest?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, good one, Caitlin. So it's not so much when, but it's wearing the ice vest versus no ice vest. So ice vest condition is the independent variable. Could you maybe extend on that and let me know if it's do you think that's an active independent variable or an attribute independent variable?
It would be active because it's been chosen by the researcher, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, great. So classic examples of attribute independent variables would be gender. So if we're comparing genders, skill level, so if we're comparing skilled athletes versus novice athletes, or a clinical condition, so if we're comparing Parkinson's patient or participants with a healthy age match control, then that's an attribute. Those attribute independent variables, they already come to us with that. We don't decide if someone's got Parkinson's or not. But in this study, where we're talking about giving some participants an ice vest and some not an ice vest, we're deciding that, we're controlling that and giving them a condition. So it's a active independent variable. Those are actually really important, I guess. Moving on, because that's sort of research methods 1 type content, but what a lot of people don't see between we start grouping the content into research methods 1 and 2 is the connection between that and then the design or the classification of research as experimental and non-experimental. So if it has an independent variable, then it's going to be an experimental type of research, but we've got two types of experimental research. We've got causal comparative, and we've got classic experimental. So can anyone tell me whether this one, if it's got an active independent variable, would be causal comparative, or whether it would be a classic experimental classification of research?
Would it be cause and comparative because of the ice vest and you're comparing it to other people that don't have it?
Yeah, it's a really common answer, Jonathan. So it seems like that. And again, there's the definition that kind of gets in the way, because you say causal comparative. We are looking for causation and we are comparing, but technically the way we define those two categories is causal comparative is based on an attribute independent variable. So we're trying to get a causal link between comparing two groups that already exist. So that's the male versus female, or the skilled versus unskilled, or the clinical population versus healthy population. So causal comparative has a attribute independent variable, whereas this one with the ice vest we're talking about, that would be a classic experimental. Think of classic experimental as like the classic chemistry type of experimental of, we add a different product to this one here, and we observe the changes of that. And so we're actually controlling the independent variable that's changed or manipulated. So both, experimental has an independent variable, but the type of independent variable dictates the type of experimental research it is, whether it's classic experimental or causal comparative. Yeah. I guess maybe we kind of move on to a different example that I'm not going to say catches people out, but maybe shifts their thinking in terms of dependent variables and independent variables. So let's let's talk about an example where we're looking at a group of basketball players, and we're really kind of interested in their free throw shooting, and we're interested in the relationship between performance, so their performance in free throw shooting through the season, and their self-efficacy in free throw shooting. So self-efficacy being like how good they think they are at free throw shooting. So what we might do is we can easily measure free throw shooting stats through a season. So let's say we have a season's worth of stats, or free throw percentage over a season for players in a whole league. And then we ask a number of participants to fill out a questionnaire that gives us an indication of their self-efficacy of free throw. So they might get a score, they might rate their ability on free throw shooting. So we've got these two measures here: free throw shooting self-efficacy and the actual free throw percentage through the season. And we run some sort of correlational analysis on those two. So we see the relationship between those two. And we'd expect there would be some relationship, some positive relationship. The better we feel about our free throw performances, probably the better we perform. Causality is a bit of a different deal there, because, if there is some a causality link, it's probably both ways. If we feel better about our free throw performances or our ability, we're probably going to perform better. But also, if we're performing well, we probably feel better about our free throw performances. So we'd expect some sort of positive relationship there, but it probably wouldn't be perfect. So let's say in a study like that, what do you think would be a dependent variable or dependent variables?
Wouldn't it still be the percentage of free throws actually being successful, and their ranking of self-efficacy? Wouldn't they still be the dependent variables?
Yeah, you got it. So they're both dependent variables. So their free throw self-efficacy and their free throw performance, both different variables that we're measuring in this study, are both dependent variables in the case, the way I outlined it there. And in fact, we don't have any independent variables in that study. So we could create an independent variable by comparing two groups on something. Let's say we had we broke up the participants into a low self-efficacy group versus a high self-efficacy group and compared them on their free throw performance. Then the self-efficacy group would be the independent variable. But if we're just doing a correlational analysis, looking for the relationship between those two variables, then they're both dependent and there's no independent variable. And so that's from research methods 1, stuff that we talked about, but research methods 2, when we're starting to classify, so we just talked in the last example about experimental, non-experimental, and the different types of experimental. Well, this is not an experimental type of research because we're not comparing groups. So it's actually a correlational type research. So the 3 types of non-experimental design we talked about are descriptive, correlational, and historical. Historic's pretty rare in exercise and sports science. There's definitely descriptive research out there. So if we're just publishing research that's kind of normative data, so it might be like we're publishing the VO2 max of a group of elite marathon runners, and then that might be important information for coaches and other athletes to compare themselves across that and compare to that normative set. Or research like this, where we're looking at relationship between different variables. And so that's fairly common. It doesn't involve any independent variables, and it's correlational type research. Does that make sense to everyone? Has anyone got any questions about those aspects there? I suspect that we're not all there and completely at the point where we're like, okay, I definitely know what is a dependent variable and what's an independent variable and how to identify it and what classification it would go into. But that's, I guess, it's an important one I wanted to talk about because it is a sticking point for a lot of people. So it is something on the mid-semester exam that I think if you work on and practice on, most people get, whether it's a light bulb moment or gradual over time, you get there and be like, okay, I can identify those. But it is something that's not super intuitive for everyone. So if you're not working on it, you can struggle on it in the mid-semester exam. So the variables and then the classification of that. The other thing that I just wanted to mention with the research methodology content and preparing for things like the mid-semester exam is that there's certain other concepts that we don't expect you to be, absolutely knowing everything about, and we're probably not going to test you as much as some people might think in mid-semester exam on deeply understanding those. So an example of that is the basic applied classification of research. So it is, some people talk about basic applied in a kind of, it's basic or it's applied, but in actual fact, it's more of a continuum, right? So some research is very basic. It's just there to, set up methodological developments, or it is just to advance our knowledge of how variables interact with each other and has no applied sort of meaning for practitioners or, athletes or clients or patients or anything like that in the real world. And other research is, almost completely applied. It answers a real world problem that's applied for people out in the industry and doesn't really tell us a lot about, how variables work with each other. But most research, especially in exercise and sports science, kind of straddles a little bit of both of those. So it's a spectrum where there are lots in the middle. So we're never going to ask you a question in this unit, especially at an undergraduate level where we're like, tell us whether this is basic or applied research, or, talk to us in depth about what makes this basic and what makes this applied. What we're going to do, what you'll see in the Research Methods 2 activity, which is kind of reflective of what happens in the mid-semester exam as well, will prompt you a little bit. So we might say, this study is more designed to provide a methodological basis for scientists moving forward. That would make it more basic or applied. And so in that way, if it's more for just setting up methodology, what do you think? Would it be basic or applied?
Would it be more applied?
Opposite, more basic. Yeah.
Oh, more basic.
Yeah. So more basic is that it's basic is for knowledge's sake or for scientific methodology. Applied is answering a real world question. So there's good examples in my area of biomechanics, motor control. There's a lot of researchers out there who are defining the best way we might analyze the anatomical movements of our body. So there's some really cool papers where we look at 3D kinematic systems or motion analysis systems, and then we might compare the measurements we have in those systems and then get the same markers and take people into the x-rays or DEXA scans and actually identify where those parameters are identifying the middle of the joint center. Those are really cool, but it doesn't answer anyone's applied question in the real world. What it is doing is setting up a strong methodological basis for other studies to come along and say, okay, we've used the methods best developed by, you know, this research past to answer some questions around shoulder loading in throwing tasks, and come up with some applied recommendations. So that latter one is more applied. You're answering a question that someone, a coach or an athlete, or a practitioner can come and take and say, okay, we're giving these recommendations. That's solving an important applied question for us. So yeah, like I said, there's a lot of research and exercise science kind of fits in the middle. But if we ask you questions on it in a mid-semester exam or a tutorial activity, it's generally going to be prompted with a, you know, it's more of this, or this aspect of the research is really aimed at that. Is that more basic or applied? So to really get you understanding what makes something basic and what makes something applied. It's the same with research instrumentation. So that's a really common one that people get a little frightened of, that we're asking, you know, questions about, you know, we might say, okay, there's this instrument here they use in, you know, exercise physiology that you've never heard of before, and we're asking you a question about, you know, is it objective, reliable and valid? And people are saying, well, I don't know, I'm not an expert on that method. And you don't have to be. So we're never going to ask you questions in this unit saying, is it valid, is it objective, is it reliable? But we are going to try to get to your understanding of those. So we might say that, you know, a certain video analysis tool in biomechanics, you know, might identify, it might be repeatable, it might be something that you can identify different joint centers with, you know, time after time. It might be objective, so it might be something that different testers can get the same joint centers with. But then from this angle, if we're trying to measure elbow joint flexion extension, you know, that might be out of plane, so that would affect what aspect of instrumentation. And so that would be validity. That would be, you know, are we actually measuring what we're intending on measuring? Because that angle there can be quite misleading in terms of the angle in the actual plane. So those, again, similar to the variables, those things can be a little difficult to read the definition and completely understand. But you just get more practice from identifying those, you know, that in different abstracts and looking at different, identifying the different research methodologies. So from an instrumentation perspective, we're not going to ask you to rate the validity of different instruments from research that you don't really have an expertise in, but we are looking to get your understanding of those things, of what reliability, what means, what objectivity means, and what validity means, and that you can kind of identify, you know, aspects of those or concerns of those in different instrumentation. Is that clear, guys? Yeah. Cool. Okay. So those are the major areas in research methodology 1 and 2, I think, that people tend to get stuck on when we work on those activities. It's probably preempting it a little bit for a lot of you guys I know who haven't maybe completed the activities yet. But it's something that, you know, as you work on over the next week, hopefully you can get more practice on, and it's something that I'd like to revisit next week in the video conference as well. See how people went. I'd also like some feedback. So make sure that when you're doing those activities, if you get stuck on something or you get to the end of them and still really don't understand something, it'd be really great to have a few dot points that you're putting down or throwing up in the chat next week and saying, hey man, I still don't really understand, you know, variables, which I know a lot of people still might be stuck on. You know, can we go through a different example of that, which I'm more than happy to do. So, you know, bear that in mind to give us a little bit of stuff to talk about next week in the video chat. Cool. Okay, so going through some of the content, that's probably the most important stuff at the moment. Group research project we've already gone through. I think that pretty much covers the key points that I wanted to get through today. But I kind of just want to finish by opening the forum up to anyone who might have questions. So this might be assessment related, it might be technology related, it might be, you know, other concerns. If you don't want to talk in front of the group, obviously, if you want to either stick around and chat on the video conference afterwards or send me an email, I'm more than happy to do that. But if it's anything that you might think would help other people as well, just let me know. So I'm just going to go around individually and see if everyone is okay. So give me a second to do that. Okay, so Lindsay, All good, mate? You can give me, if you are, guys, just give me a thumbs up on the video or on the reactions. Lindsay?
Can we have a chat after this?
Yep, for sure. Yep, I'll stick around if you can stay on the line.
Yep.
Annika? Annika, you there? Okay, we'll come back to you. Caitlin, all good?
Yeah, I'm all good. If we had a chance, would we be able to try the breakaway groups?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
how that
Yep.
works?
Yeah, cool. So maybe what I'll do is I'll finish off going around to everyone, and then I might just have a play around with the breakaway groups. I think that's good. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, I saw the thumbs up from you, Annika. Thanks for that. Hunter, you there, Hunter? You're all good? Okay, Jonathan. Yep, nice. Oh, that was Jonathan Miranda. Jonathan Wickham.
Yeah, I'm all good.
Yep, nice one. Okay, Michaela. Thank you. Josephine, all good? Okay. Kane, all good there? Yep. Okay. Lockie. Nice one. I can see the thumb peeking up at the bottom of the video there. Lenny, all good?
Yeah, all good.
Nice one. Sophie, I think we've done, yep, Sophie's all good. Cool, okay, so I think I've got through my list there. Okay, guys, so if you're all happy, then feel free to head off. Otherwise, if you want to stick around, I'm just going to, we'll have a play around with the breakout rooms. So,
hey, Matt, I just had one more question real quick.
Can
Can I just confirm what day and date and time the exam is, mid-sem exam? Is it next week?
Yeah, good one. So it's still planned at the moment to be in week 7. Now, obviously, when week 7 has shifted based on the early mid-semester break. So we're currently in week 5. So it'll be, I think what we might do is open it up online Wednesday in week 7. So instead of doing it in the normal class time, it'd be nice to have the video conferences that week just to sort of make sure everyone's on the right track. So on the Mondays and Tuesdays, and then probably Wednesday of that week 7, we'll open up online and then maybe have it shut down on Sunday of that week. You think that's going to be okay?
Yeah, that's great. And just checking the time as well for that exam. Have you got that down yet? Or?
I think what we'd probably do is have it as asynchronous. So we'd have it similar to the quizzes where you can access it in your own time.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Sweet. Yeah. Thanks.
No worries. And I guess a little bit of background on that as well. We've had certainly a few national discussions around that mid-semester exam. I think people will generally be on track for that time frame. And the thing we don't want to do is if we push that further back, we end up sort of tackling stats and the first half of the semester stuff at the same time. Can be a little bit difficult. So I think that, at the moment we'll keep it there. But like I said, if we do get people who are, feeling like they're not on track, I'm happy to adjust that individually for people if they've had circumstances come up, which I know a lot of people are having. And or if a lot of people are saying, hey, we're not actually on track for it, then we're happy to move it back en masse as well. Cool. Okay, so any other questions before we go into the breakout rooms?
The weekly quizzes, are they still going to be happening weekly on that?
Yes.
Same as before?
Same as before. So I guess the structure to probably bear in mind is that we're still having the model of doing the content and the quizzes in a certain week. So this week you've got academic writing, quiz, the content open and the quiz open. And then end of this week, early next week, we'll have the online tutorial activity for that open. So kind of using that, you're doing a quiz on it to get base level understanding knowledge. And then you do that online activity to help build that understanding and get the application going for mid-semester exam and the group research project at the end. So it's kind of like a staggered quiz 1 week, video content quiz of certain module 1 week, and then you do the tutorial activity for that one the week afterwards. But yeah, same thing, same deal. If you've had problems with the quizzes, and I know there's a few people who missed the last quiz as well. So if you've had issues, obviously with everything that's been going on, let me know. And if we have enough people, then we might also just sort of open up some times where people can come in and redo, or not redo, but do those quizzes that they might have missed. I said I wouldn't do that at the start of semester, but I think it's an exceptional circumstance. All right. Okay, guys, so if there's no other questions, I haven't used the breakout rooms before. I can see there's an automatic and a manual option, so I might try the manual option. So it says assign 13 participants to, let's go 3 rooms, and we'll might see how we go from there. If this does push people off the line, then I'll see you guys next week. Otherwise, we'll see how we go in these. All right. So we've got assign. So Caitlin, Hunter, and the 2 Jonathans have assigned to 1 room there. Jonathan, I can see you still on the line there. Are you, have you got an option to click into the breakout room there?
Is that me, that one?
Yeah, both.
I can't see one on my screen.
Yeah, I don't have anything either.
Okay.
Yep, that one worked.
Okay.
Cool.
Did you guys want to join that and see what happens? Okay. All right, everyone else, I think they're in there. Cool. So what I might do is just
How do we actually get to the breakout room? Is there like a setting on the actual video?
I'm not sure. Can you see anything on your side that selects breakout rooms, or is it just me?
I've got a chat option.
Okay. So what I might do then is
just on that map, we can come back into the main session from the breakout room.
Cool. Can you come in and out of the main session?
No, I think we need that invite again. Oh no, there's a breakout room thing here. Yeah, we can.
Yeah, there's an option down the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
Yeah, that's working.
Nice one. Okay.
That's cool.
See if we can go assign some more people. So Kane, Sophie, Annika, I'm assigning you to breakout room 3. Lindsay, Lenny.
There we go. Yep.
Taylor. Assign you to breakout room 1. So I wonder if I can join. So I'm just going to join one of those rooms myself. I'll be back in a sec.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, good.
We've got the coolest breakout room for sure right now. Awesome. That was fairly easy from your guys' end, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we just have to
Did it force you into the room to start with, or did you have to select it?
No, you have to press join.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Awesome. Okay, looks pretty straightforward. Any more questions from you guys? Lindsay, I know you wanted to ask questions next, so maybe we'll just hold that for when everyone else goes off.
No, there was more of a generic question in regards to the what we just talked about today. So I actually did all the research. What's the actual the week 4 research lecture last week, and I was a little bit confused in regards to whether that test was supposed to be done. No, not last week. Before that. Whether it was supposed to be done last week or this week.
Yeah, so that was Research Methods 1 online tutorial activity.
Research Methods 1 and 2.
1 and 2. Yeah. Okay. We might do. Let's maybe head out back to the main area, and then I just might answer that for anyone else who's around as well. Okay.
I'll leave there.
I'm pretty sure we can like start working on it as soon as we've got groups, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Hey all.
How
Hey.
you doing?
Okay. So that was cool. I think very straightforward for everyone to jump in and out of those. Yeah, I'm not sure if we can jump back into breakout rooms once
We go to
join options here. Can you guys do that?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So once they're assigned, I think we maybe then can just jump in and out of them. So that's maybe something that we'll do a little bit more next week. So I think next week what we'll have is a kind of bit more of it on the group research project. So if you guys want to chat this week, put names down and things like that, then hopefully we'll have groups next week and we'll just spend a little time in those breakout rooms and I can join those as you start to develop them. Feel free, I think I heard the end of that one, Caitlin, of starting the project. So if you want to, you don't have to just stop at having the topic and the group. If you want to work a little bit more on that this week, that's fine. I guess the really important dates for the group research project, we map backwards from the due date at the end. So you really want to have the data collected and analysed at least a week before the due date. So sort of week 11 is kind of the last time you really want to be analysing data, and you want to be leaving that last week or two for the write-up. And then so research data collection should really be done week sort of more like 9, 10 at the latest. But if we can get it going sooner than that, then that's fantastic. And so that sounds like we've got a lot of time, and we are, I think, still pretty fine for time if we start working on some of the details next week. But there is quite a bit to get through when you start working through the details of the project. That will expect some time to go back and forth on, what exactly you're measuring and how you're going to break up groups, and then even some time for pilot testing. So, doing it at home, figuring out how you do the experiment, and then being like, oh, okay, we didn't think of all these different variables that we're going to control for those, or we're not going to control for those, things like that. So it will take some time. The earlier you get working on it as a group, the better. But yeah, next week we'll have some dedicated time in this video conference session for that. I guess the last thing I just want to touch on was a question Lindsay had, which was around the research methods 1 and 2 online tutorial activities. Ideally, or I guess there's one school of thought that we would have liked to have those as a similar in a way to the face-to-face tutorials, where we, it's kind of like an attendance thing where we, you really need to do that to meet the attendance requirements for the semester. This semester we really don't, and especially during this transition, we really don't want to create a rod for our own backs there. We don't want to enforce things around those tutorials that people need to do those. Obviously you need to keep up with the quizzes because that's going straight to assessment. The tutorial activities are really meant for your development to help you prepare for those other assessments. So I'm not going to enforce you needing to do those or needing to do those in a certain weeks. Same as the teleconference. The teleconferences, I think, are going to become really important for the group research project. So if you're not contributing to a group, then we're going to have to start talking about that with individuals and consider whether you're going to stay in that group. So the easiest way of doing that is to continue to, to do the video conference each week. I think that's going to be a good one to make sure we can keep on top of it. But as with those tutorials activities, if you haven't done them yet, no problem, do them now. I think they're going to help. If you have done them already, fantastic. Keep up with them as much as you can. If you miss one and are getting to an assessment and worried that we're going to pull you up on that assessment because you haven't completed any, that's not going to happen this semester. So it's really just up to you guys to make sure you're progressing with those and getting the resources and support you want. Does that answer the question, Lindsay?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Any others before we head off, guys? No? Awesome. Well, it's been really good to see everyone here. For those guys who didn't have a camera, that's not a problem. I understand that with technology. If you can have one for future weeks, I think that's kind of the ideal for the interactions. But yeah, as long as we can all tune in and have a voice and listen, I think that's going to be really important. So have a good week, guys. And like I said, any questions that come up, let me know. Otherwise, we'll catch you next week on the video chat.
Thanks, Matt.
See you later. Stay safe.
Thanks, Matt.
See you
Thanks.
guys. You too.